I hope you're not in a rush because this is going to be a long conversation. We will have time for the Q&A so that we can go into nitty-gritty details of how and what is relevant specifically for you. Let me first introduce myself. So my name is Vladislav, and there's an old song by a band called Hathaway, which you may have heard, called "What is Love? Baby, don't hurt me, don't hurt me no more." So this is usually how you can remember how to pronounce my name, Vladislav. It's that similar. Okay. Well, yes, lineage here is important, of course. So I'm a fellow advocate for therapeutic consumption of psychedelics. I have been consuming them for 23 years of my life. I've acquired a lot of data knowledge, not only from my lived experiences, but also from science. And I will share with you later why am I actually qualified to talk about psychedelics in particularly. And for the duration of this conversation, I would prefer to refer to psychedelics as entheogens. And if the question arises at some point in time, I will address it, but just treat it as a synonym, basically, because it pretty much means the same group of substances, which I will, of course, explain in details, right? Couple of rules just to contain the environment. So there's scientific evidence clearly demonstrating that human attention can last so far, right? It's like 90-minute ultradian cycles, so if you've heard of those. If not, basically, within 90 minutes, we're capable of maintaining high level of concentration. After 90-minute mark, our attention drops quite significantly. So the idea here is to condense all the information that I have within that 90-minute cycle. For that to happen, it would require for you to, well, stay here, attentively listening and absorbing information ideally, but that would limit me to answer your questions. So my invitation to you would be to write down your questions whenever they arise, or memorize them, or type whatever, so that I can answer them later on, because if I start to answer them on the go, I'll get completely derailed and would have to squeeze in the parts that require a lot of attention and details, all right? The second thing is that the conversation around psychedelic entheogens, can be a bit triggering, because the thing I love about this group of substances is that it is multi-category, multi-dimensional, and multidisciplinary, right? Well, so what does that mean? The substances should not be considered from just one point of view or perspective, because they sit at the intersection of many different layers, such as pharmacology, neuroscience, psychology, trauma-informed therapy, maybe coaching, maybe history, maybe anthropology, whatever, culture, etc., etc. There are many domains that basically cover this topic. But some of the things that I will be talking about may be a bit potentially triggering, especially when it comes to talk in a conversation about trauma. So whenever you feel like something is rising within yourself, your heartbeat is speeding up, or maybe you notice that your breath becomes more shallow, you can put a hand on your heart, on the chest, and then take a deep breath until your lungs are full, and then take a second one, and then slowly, intentionally extend every exhale that you make. And then you make a second one until your lungs are full, and then another one on top, and then slowly, gradually letting go of the air from your lungs. That exercise on itself shifts your nervous system from a state of sympathetic to a parasympathetic state. In simple words, basically, you relax your nervous system intentionally, meaning that down-regulates potential triggers or whatever you may feel in terms of the hard feelings, okay? I'll be as gentle as I can, and I'll try to mitigate difficult topics, but there are some things that need to be covered, and I just simply cannot ignore them when I talk about entheogens, because unfortunately there's a lot of misconceptions, there are a lot of stigma, there are a lot of scary stories around how people consumed entheogens and then went mad. unfortunately, that has nothing to do with reality as long as you understand how those substances actually work. My intention here is not to tell people consume any mind-altering substances at all. I'm not promoting, I'm not selling anything. Well, the only services that I sell is integration services, which is a different topic. But generally speaking, the idea here is to provide information, scientifically verified, accurate information about application of entheogens both in recreational and therapeutic protocols. There are two different protocols, if you think about it. So recreational is probably the vast majority of use cases, like when people go to a party, to an electronic festival, do this by themselves with a group of friends, etc. And just, enjoy whatever they are doing. It's more about external stimulation, like, looking at the visuals, going in nature, and just what they say or call tripping. The therapeutic protocol is completely different. It is designed to help people address severe types of issues within psyche, such as PTSD, depression, anxiety, substance use disorder, migraines, cluster headaches, fibromyalgia, anorexia nerviosa, and the list goes on and on. There's a lot of scientific evidence to this day that clearly demonstrate that there is a lot of not just potential, but efficacy when it comes to proper use of entheogens. The problem, however, is that therapeutic approach is very limited in its scalability to this day. It's usually quite expensive, it's quite hard, difficult to get access to it as well. But if you understand how to approach consciously consumption of entheogens, you can actually self-heal. And this is not an invitation to go and self-heal yourself, right? This is a lecture in a sense, and me sharing with you scientific information about how to not fuck up your psyche, basically, right? I've seen cases throughout 23 years of my own personal history. I've been through really challenging trips that took me 9 years to digest and absorb and integrate. And I know how disturbing can that be, especially if you don't approach consumption in a conscious manner. So that's why the data that I'm gonna share with you today during this conversation is structured information that I personally lacked 23 years ago when I first started my interactions with entheogens. Because if I had this data back in the day, that could have been like a completely different story. But luckily for me, I have discovered therapeutic potential of entheogens quite early, and then I applied that to heal my own traumatic events from the past and change a lot of things in my life. One thing to remember about entheogens in general is that they are not magic pill. They don't cure people. Whatever people say, it's bullshit. It doesn't work like that, okay? You need to remember that they're catalyzers. And this is an important concept. As Stanislav Grof, one of the founders of psychedelic-assisted therapy, called them, they're non-specific amplifiers. They act as catalysts. So whatever is happening in your psyche gets magnified many-folds, thousand-folds, right? So if the psyche is not stable, well, you're going to be destabilized even further. If a person is... before going there. So let me quickly walk you through the 10 tips that I will, tips or pillars, I don't know how you call them, like rules, safety measures. I call it the pre-flight instruction, basically, right? So when you go on a plane, they tell you, you got your vest under your seat, you got your mask, put a mask on yourself and then on your child. So this is pretty much similar type of instruction, pre-flight type of, right? So that you don't mess up your own psyche. I'll just quickly go through them, and I will go through each and every one in more details. And of course, we'll have time to discuss and cover whatever's relevant for you. So the 10 rules are following. Boundaries and consent is number one. The second one is know what you consume, the specific substance. The third one is the set and setting. Fourth one is know thyself. Fifth one is preparation. Sixth one is called don't mix. Seventh is find a sitter. Eighth, it's sitter, as in a dog sitter. Eighth one, it's temporary. That's important to remember, we'll get to it. Ninth, trust, be open, let go. And finally, 10th one is aim for integration, okay? So let's dig into it. So the first one is called boundaries in consent. And when it comes to pharmaceutical interventions or medical interventions, rather, when you go to do a blood test or visit a doctor, they ask you to sign a form on informed consent that they will be doing some specific procedures on you, and you consent to this. Unfortunately, in the history of entheogens, well, originally it started without any consent. So one of the biggest things that contributed to that factor is, unfortunately, the desire of certain individuals to use these mind-altering substances to control minds of others. So projects by CIA like MK Ultra took place, which means they have been giving LSD to people who were not aware of it, just to see how it works. Initially, when Sandoz pharmaceutical company, which synthesized LSD, they distributed LSD among various types of psychiatric wards with the intention to basically solicit feedback and understand how is it working. So these substances have been given to people without their consent just to see how it works. Unfortunately, people still think that it's a good idea to give mind-altering substance to others. And yesterday I had a conversation with a good friend of mine who shared her story that she went to see a friend in Brazil, and then basically some dudes suggested, gave them a drink which was altered with LSD. It was her first experience with entheogens. It was difficult, really challenging. She managed to navigate it, luckily, without the severe consequences for health. But one thing important to understand is that when it comes to consent in the context of entheogens, it is crucial to understand that, again, they act as magnifiers, and if a person has a predisposition for cases of schizophrenia, bipolar disease, mania episodes, if person is unstable in terms of their psychological state, if a person is suicidal, it is extremely important to remember to not give people these substances. Because just for example, if a person is suicidal and has a suicidal ideation, and for them an entheogenic experience can basically remove the last barrier to action, because people go through dying in a sense, and they can somewhat lose fear of death or come to terms with the fear of death. So for a person who is suicidal, there's okay, I'm no longer afraid. Okay, that's why they can act on it, because before that they've been afraid, and now they're it's not scary. So of course it's important to remember about that, and never even suggest to a person without understanding their medical condition. And if a person is lacking sleep, that could be a sufficient enough condition for them to have a really destabilizing journey. As well as if their parents had a predisposition, or not predisposition, but severe cases of, again, schizophrenia, bipolar disease, or mania episodes, it is, well, of course, a restriction for them to consume the substances, because they cannot create a problem per se, but they can act as triggers, right? So depending on other factors, that can be a really destabilizing issue. But good thing is that usually it is something that can be managed and can be treated and can be addressed, because again, entheogens, they don't make people crazy. It doesn't work like this. Entheogens amplify whatever's inside. So even if there's a way of HPPD, for instance, it's called hallucinogen perception persistent disorder, which is in DSM-5 as a type of the consequence that people face when, well, they get a very difficult journey with entheogens. That can be addressed and actually healed, but again, people don't know about it. So it's important to recognize that, of course, there are these restrictions when it comes to consent, and there are certain other boundaries as well. There is one other thing that is important to understand about entheogens, is that they do not change people per se. On the contrary to the common fact, and some people say, oh, I tried entheogen and then, I became this and that person. Yeah, it doesn't work like that. What it does, though, is that it actually makes people more open. That is a scientific fact. It's true, it's validated. On all other cases, that all solely depends on them, on the container, the preparation, and the integration. We will talk about that. So boundaries in consent is highly important and highly critical. And if you ever go to a retreat, or if you ever plan to work with, a shaman or healer who works with the medicine, if they don't say a word about boundary and consent, that is a red flag. Okay? And when it comes to boundary and consent, especially in the therapeutic context, there are two things, well, among others, to remember. One is the therapeutic touch, which is a very controversial topic. For some, it could be, really healing. For others, it could be re-traumatizing, right? So it has to be, again, communicated up front. There's one other thing, which is really dark side of the entire community. I'd say it's the dark side of humanity on itself, is that 8% of women go through sexual violence in the ceremonial context of the consumption of entheogens. Why does that happen? Because entheogens, they dissolve boundaries, they dissolve mental structures, and some people abuse power by taking advantage of other people, not just sexually, financially, and other ways. So it is important to understand that boundaries are highly critical when it comes to working with the medicine and others. And I will refer to entheogens as the medicine as well, because they can heal, right? So the second one, know what you consume. So let's talk quickly about what are the entheogens, right? So there's different people who would say different categorizations. For me, the categorization is pretty much as following. I would not divide them in classic and novel psychedelics. There's a way that you can divide them into organic and chemical compounds. It doesn't really matter. What matters is how they affect the mind. So originally they were called mind manifesting. Psychedelic is a mind manifesting, which is a word that was created by completely forgot the name. Humphrey Osmond, yes. He was a therapist from UK, British Canadian therapist. Humphrey, mind manifesting, they manifest the mind.
Okay.
It's two Greek words. And then in his mail exchange with Aldous Huxley. Anyway, later on, of course, new words appeared that describe them, such as entheogens, which translate as the divine within. Divine, as in godlike, whatever it is, it's within. But the list of entheogens is pretty much as follows. Cannabis is considered as an entheogen, but then again, people abuse the medicine, and well, you see whatever you see. Then it's not in the order of importance, it's just in completely random one. So it's LSD, which is lysergic diethylamide, synthesized originally by a pharmaceutical company called Sandoz by Albert Hofmann on April 19th, 1938. Sorry, no, it was the wrong date. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And then psilocybin, then it's ayahuasca, which is widely popular, but that entheogen is very different from the rest of entheogens simply for the reason that it does not have a standard molecule. Unlike the other compounds, they do have a standard molecule. Ayahuasca is a brew of two, ingredients that have DMT, dimethyltryptamine, and MAO inhibitor that is widely used in pharmaceutical industry as the type of antidepressant. So basically, MAO slows down the dissolution of DMT within the body. And I met a wonderful person from Estonia who wrote a PhD on ayahuasca. And she gathered 104 samples of this brew from different shamans in Latin America. None of them were the same. So you need to understand that it's not a standard molecule. It's a recipe, basically, for brewing it. So you got DMT as a separate entheogen, which contains an ayahuasca, but it is consumed by, either vaporized manner by inhaling or sometimes in other forms, but we're not going to go into that. MDMA Ketamine is also considered as an entheogen, and nowadays it's quite widely used in many countries as well. We got salvinarin A, as in Salvia divinorum. It's a type of plant that, anyway, it's a long story. It's not important to remember that 5-MeO-DMT, which is a secretion of a toad, which is a venom basically that the toad secretes, that is very, very powerful mind-altering compound. And there's ibogaine. Ibogaine is a substance that is contained in a root bark called iboga, coming from Gabon, which is a country in the African continent. This by far is it's not one, it's the most powerful entheogen because it is long-lasting up to 36 hours, okay? Yeah, I went through that in December. It's a totally different experience. So anyway, the length of the journey itself varies significantly depending on the substance. So DMT, 5-MeO-DMT can last like 15 minutes, up to like 30 minutes depends, but usually it's like 10-15 minutes. Then psilocybin or the magic mushrooms is like roughly 5 or 6 hours. LSD can last as long as 14 hours. Usually it's like 10. And then you got ibogaine, which is like 36 hours full-on experience. So it is a difficult one, but it's extremely efficient at treating substance use disorder. Anyway, so it is important to understand what exactly you're consuming, how is that going to affect you, because different entheogens, they have different properties and how they affect the mind and the body as well. Because, for example, again, ayahuasca would send you into purging. That is actually part of the healing, and some people don't like it, like, oh, I don't want to throw up, but yeah, well, it's part of the journey, so to speak, in a sense. And then there are others that are rapid acting, and then when it comes to, again, consumption, understand what exactly you are consuming, and when it comes to going to a retreat, it is highly important to ask what exactly is the medicine, where is it coming from, and who created it, because unfortunately, some of the substances can get adulterated, like MDMA, usually sold as ecstasy or Molly, or there are other names. Usually, it is adulterated with other substances. There's been a study that analyzed the quality of the MDMA, the impurity. It's pretty much never pure, but there were up to like 200 different compounds that used to adulterate MDMA. So basically, you get a pill, but it's not MDMA 100%. It's usually, it could be caffeine, very mild, but then it could be something more brutal, such as like fentanyl. Yeah, that could be deadly completely. So yeah, I mean, it's difficult to test it, but there are places in Barcelona, a place called Energy Control, where you can bring your substance, they will test it, and it will tell you what is the purity of it. So yeah, it's important to understand what exactly is the substance and how it was sourced, whether or not it's organic or not organic. And with LSD, it could be pretty much similar. I've been through cases when I've been sold something that people told me as LSD was not LSD for sure. I mean, it was like some other like really, really hardcore shit, but not LSD. Not all the cases, but I remember a couple of them. Anyway, it's hard to know exactly. So usually it is safer to go with something organic because it's typically not that toxic. But when it comes to informed consent and knowing what you understand, it is highly critical to remember to not mix substances. We'll talk about it, but then with pharmaceuticals specifically, because ayahuasca combined with MAO inhibitor can be deadly. Okay, although it's extremely safe on its own, but if it's combined with another pharmaceutical, it can lead to death. Some combinations can lead to what's called serotonin syndrome, which is not nice to experience. And for example, ibogaine, which is extremely efficient at treating opioid use disorder, combined with opioids is a deadly combination, ironically. But it is therefore important to understand what exactly you are consuming, how is it going to affect you, and where is it coming from, ideally, source, impurity, etc., etc. So let's go to the third one, set and setting. Set and setting is a beautiful term that describes everything that is happening prior to the experience, during the experience, and after the experience in a way as well. But mainly it's before and during. That concept was originally introduced by widely renowned Timothy Leary. Probably you've all heard of him. In the United States, they called him public enemy number one back in the day, but he was a professor of psychology of Harvard, and he was a really talented individual. He wrote a few books, and one of the concepts that he left after him that is still widely used in the global entheogenic community is set and setting. So basically, what does that mean? Set is like your mind state, like where you are. Again, we talked about the person being unstable, maybe suicidal. That's a set, okay, what's happening in the mind. So for example, if a person is going to an entheogenic journey on Saturday, they planned it all, like, okay, I'm gonna do this, they know the substance, they planned it all out. And then on Thursday, something really destabilizing happens. I don't know, they go through a breakup, I don't know, maybe they get fired, or their relative gets diagnosed with some disease, or they have a very deep emotional experience that is very destabilizing them. That would mean that ideally it's best to postpone any consumption of an entheogen, because what you want to do is that you want to make sure that your psyche is stabilized, that you have a really good sleep, that your nervous system is well regulated, you don't consume a lot of other substances like alcohol, sugar, like social media, news, especially. One of the things when it comes to consumption of entheogens, especially in the ayahuasca context, and the thing that I find really beautiful about it is that it's not an occasional journey. You cannot just randomly take ayahuasca. It requires a lot of preparation. It requires a lot of dieting, both physical, as in not eating certain groups of products because they would affect how you feel, but also mental fasting, as in not consuming toxic content, not reading news, not consuming social media, just abstaining from all the garbage that pollutes the mind, so that your body is, biological nervous system is, prepared and clean, so to speak. So that is the set that you want to stay in when you go into the journey. But of course, there are other things such as intention, like understanding, like why the hell are you doing this, right? So, of course, sometimes it can be just, I want to trip with my friends. Sure, up to you. But then again, if you want to consume them in a more conscious approach, the one that would help you actually address things inside of you, then it is probably beneficial to think about what is the intention, like why am I doing this? What do I want to get out of this experience? And this is the set, this is the mindset, so to speak, right? The setting, you can talk about for hours about setting only, but this is all about making sure that throughout the journey while you're under the influence of an entheogen, you are located in a very extremely safe and trusting environment. If there is something that you're not safe about, if you don't feel that there's enough trust, that's gonna hit you hard, because you can go and spiral into paranoid state, which is not cool. Trust me, I've been there many times. So it is important to make sure that you are in a very safe environment. You know who are the people with you if you're not alone, because they will influence you, whether you want it or not. You will spiral and think, what's happening with that person? Somebody's going through the processes, and you will automatically start to project it to yourself. Are they thinking about me? Why am I affecting them? And that's gonna spiral you into places where you don't want to go. Also, you want to make sure that the environment is extremely comfortable. You got everything you need. You got your music, you got your comfortable clothes. One thing about retreats in particular is that, we'll talk about preparation, but nevertheless, wear extremely comfortable clothes. Like the ones that you feel whatever pose you take, it's just gonna be comfortable, okay? It's very light and stretching materials, ideally organic, not synthetic, because it may feel different on the skin, but nevertheless. And of course, light snacks, a lot of water, electrolytes are really important because they help conduct the signals in the brain. They act as an intermediary for the your brain networks, so to speak, right? So that you operate properly. So you want to stay hydrated. And then fruits, veggies, avoid meat, ultra-processed foods as well. And make sure that during the journey itself, you will not have to do anything. You will not need to attend to whatever you need to attend, like going to help your friend move from one apartment to another, okay? Or go I don't know, on some important like grocery buying mission. Like just chill throughout the entire journey. Make sure that you have nothing to do but to be with yourself, be with the experience, listen to your body, listen to whatever comes and just be with it, sit with it and not get distracted by anything. And ideally make sure that your neighbors are not demolishing their walls when you're at it, because it's going to be really destabilizing. So this is the setting, and you want to make sure that it is extremely caring, extremely gentle, extremely supporting for whatever the processes you're going through. Okay. Next one, know thyself. This is more about understanding who you are and what sits inside of you. This may be a bit triggering, but originally, as I said, entheogens were called psychedelics, mind manifesting. So how they work? Technically, there's conscious perception of the world and there's unconscious world that we live in, and most of our actions on a daily basis are unconscious. Some could argue between 70 to 90% of whatever we do say is unconscious. And whatever we have experienced throughout our life, be it traumatic experience or some self-limiting beliefs, our fears, or some painful memories from the past, they are stored within our psyche. And then some people prefer not to deal with that difficult material. So they push away those thoughts, they try not to think about it. They're like, no, I want to stay positive. And you can talk a lot about the toxic positivity here, but then people ignore the problem. They pretend that it doesn't exist, that trauma that happened to them never happened. They try to forget about it. And this is where with entheogens, it's not going to fly at all, okay? So I have two metaphors when it comes to an entheogenic experience. So one metaphor would be like a dam. Imagine a dam, right? So you got dam that holds the pressure from the water, yeah. So you got the water underneath, you got a settlement, right? You got a dam that is protecting all that water and the pressure that sits on top. So what usually happens is that the valve chambers get twisted, and there's a bit of pressure that goes through the dam so that it's not falling apart, there are no cracks, etc. So when an entheogen enters your mind, that dam goes like this, okay? So whatever was sitting in your unconscious gets all the way to your conscious perception of whatever happened. And one critical thing to understand and remember is that our perception of time in our general daily life, it's kind of linear, right? We agree, there's past, there's now, and there's future, right? Time is not linear when it comes to an entheogenic experience. So people get to re-experience some things from the past, maybe future, who knows, but nevertheless, as if they are happening right now. So all that material just floods the system, and people are not prepared to deal with that shit. I mean, your trauma from, fifth grade, or your, parents not tending to your needs when you were 4 or 5, doesn't matter, just rises up and demands your attention. It's like, I'm here, let's talk. And you're like, oh shit. Yeah. And then this is what people usually call a bad trip. They're like, I had a bad trip. Yeah, but bad trips don't exist. Because what actually happens is that people get to interact with themselves and the parts and the suppressed memories, the pain, the suffering inside that they didn't want to face. And they're like, oh shit, this is bad trip. No, this is you. This is the shadow part of you, what's Jung called. This is the thing, maybe some dark thoughts, maybe, some weird fantasies. It doesn't, it's you, right? So people, when they say bad trip, they basically refer to this experience because they are experiencing themselves. It's not the world that is bad, it's their projection, their perception of the world that they're going through, that, oh no, that's awful. But that's just part of you. Just accept it. That would be the advice, but we'll get to a more nuanced one. So that's the first metaphor, the dam. There's a second metaphor that I came up with. It's called the Marian Trench. The Marian Trench is the deepest part on the planet. It's like 11 kilometers deep. It's like Everest and deeper. So again, above the surface of the water, this is the conscious mind where we are here right now. And then there's unconscious that is, affecting our judgments. It's genetics, epigenetics, trauma, our upbringing, our cultural indoctrination, multi-generational trauma, whatever, you name it, right? So it all sits underneath. identity, self-limiting beliefs, whatever we think about ourselves, everything is sitting unconscious, like really deep inside, right? So when a person takes an entheogen, they basically go deep inside of their own psyche, and then they get to interact with whatever is sitting inside. So when I talk about know thyself, recognize that, well, we all have trauma and it's completely fine. There's not a single individual out there who is not traumatized. The fact of being born is traumatizing by itself. And Stanislav Grof described it perfectly with his system of perinatal matrices. But basically, you're in the womb, you're in the heaven, and then the world contracts and you're like in a hostile, cold environment. Well, they cut you off from the heaven, and then you get to deal with the bright light and these entities that surround you, whatever they do with you. Anyway, so that's traumatic on itself, and people go through that by different means. But anyway, it's not the point. Point here is understand what are your triggers, understand who you are, know your just identity and how you behave. For example, if you're a person who feels anxious in place where there are a lot of people, well, don't consume entheogens in places where there's a lot of people, because you're going to get even more anxious and you're not going to enjoy it. So know your limitations, know whatever's happening inside of you. Know that if there's a really serious traumatic event that sits inside your psyche and you're aware of it, be prepared that it may come to you, and just, get ready to deal with it. And I'll talk about how to deal with it later on. But it's important to know yourself, of course. Preparation. So preparation, again, a few hours, but basically you don't want to treat an entheogenic journey and experience as something light, because, well, as said, it can be really disturbing, right? It can be traumatizing, but it can be really healing as well. So the latest scientific evidence clearly demonstrates, to the surprise of many people who actually promote various types of healing modalities with the assistance of entheogens, is that they are not a magic pill. The actual healing happens in the preparation and integration. So before and after. Of course, the journey itself has to be like properly organized and all. But it is critical to understand that preparation actually is the part that requires a lot of attention. The more, the better you prepare, the higher are the chances that not only you will enjoy the journey, but you will be healed in a sense. Because, there are ways on how to actually heal with the assistance of entheogens, even without a therapist. I mean, I'm not talking blasphemy here, right? Not many people can afford it, actually, because psychedelic assisted therapy is not cheap. It requires a lot of time. It's really expensive. But if you know how to apply the medicine, you can actually do that. So anyway, when it comes to preparation, it's partially covering all the aspects that I've already talked about. You need to understand what is the substance, like how much are you planning to consume, where you sourced it, where are you going to do this, and make sure that you're not disturbed and not actually in need to do anything that requires a lot of attention or your presence on the following day as well, okay? So what that means, if you've planned a journey on Saturday, don't plan anything on Sunday. Just make sure that you have everything you need to recover, to ground yourself, to take care of the needs of your nervous system, and just chill and do nothing. Because again, there's this concept of neuroplasticity you probably all are aware of, but there is another thing that is called the critical, critical period. I don't remember how it's called properly, like critical periods, yes. So anyway, the idea there is that within these critical periods, we get to learn specific skills, or maybe, use our limbs for that matter as well, or learn the language, or use our sight, vision, etc. Okay, right. Forgot one thing, but I'll get back to it. When it comes to critical periods, is that when you consume an entheogen, the window of neuroplasticity, aka critical period, opens up. Okay, so what does that mean? Is that during that period, while you have a high period of neuroplasticity, you can absorb new information, you can rewire existing neural networks or create new ones, right? Depending on the substance, for ketamine, and this is preclinical models, it's not yet verified in humans, but preclinical models are done in mice. Nevertheless, pretty much most of scientific evidence arises from the preclinical models in mice. So that can be theoretically relevant for humans as well. So anyway, for ketamine, the window of neuroplasticity or critical period is roughly 72 hours, which means within 72 hours upon consumption, you can, well, rewire your self-limiting beliefs, go to see a therapist and work on the trauma that reemerged, or do journaling, or do whatever you want to do to utilize that period. For other substances like psilocybin, if I remember correctly, it's 2 weeks, and then it can go as long as a month and a half for iboga, which is, again, quite powerful medicine. So the idea here is that what you want to make sure is that you avoid the things that could negatively impact your life choices or lifestyle in the following days after the journey, okay? So not only you want to land, you want to make sure that you're not increasing load on your nervous system. This is the period where you can actually implement changes. But one thing to remember with entheogens is never, never, ever, 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 ever act on a big life decisions and choices right after you've consumed an entheogen. Don't do that. It's not wise at all. If you think it's a good idea, write it down, wait for a few weeks. If after 3 weeks or 4 weeks you still think it's a good idea, then act on it, okay? I've seen many cases like this. I've been doing stupid shit like this as well. Like, I have this brilliant idea. And then a few weeks later, fuck, that's not a good idea. Or some people decide to end relationships, start new relationship, quit a job, start their business, become a shaman. We'll talk about it in a second. It's a whole nother chapter. But anyway, make sure that the afterglow period, so to speak, is done in a way that is helping support your nervous system rather than disturb it further, okay? So yeah, one thing that I remembered and I forgot to say is that in the therapeutic protocol of consumption of entheogens, there's notion of the journey is happening inside your psyche. So the difference between recreational and therapeutic is that in recreational context, people usually observe the world, so to speak, and roughly 50 to 60% of our neural networks in our brain is allocated to vision processing. So in therapeutic protocol, people use eye shades, eye masks, so that your vision is not affecting whatever you're going through, and your entire attention is allocated or focused towards your inner world. This is where the magic happens, okay? It's just an important aspect to remind ourselves. So let's move to the next one. Don't mix. I've already partially touched it by saying that, yeah, you want to make sure that you're not combining specific entheogens with pharmaceuticals. But also, some people combine various other substances and they're not thinking clearly. They're actually distorting the way they are experiencing the medicine. But sometimes they are actually making it worse for them. So, well, it's not a good idea to combine with alcohol at all, like even before or after. Alcohol in itself is highly toxic for the body in general. But with entheogens, it can really change the entire experience and send you in a totally different trajectory. So it's never a good idea to combine with alcohol. There's a beautiful matrix created by tripsit.me that basically outlines, I'll share this information, you don't need to write it down, that outlines various types of interactions with not just the pharmaceutical medicine, but also other substances. And some people find it, I used to do that back in the day, maybe like 15 years ago or so, kind of soothing when you go through like a journey with psilocybin or LSD or whatever, and then you land back and then you smoke a joint. Not a good idea, Because again, if you think of it from the perspective of the critical periods, basically you are rewiring your nervous system towards this combination of consumption of cannabis after the consumption of entheogen, and just generally your nervous system's like, oh, new habit, okay, let's build it in, because again, you are in a very, very vulnerable state. So whatever you're doing, you're actually either cementing further the lifestyle choices that you make on a daily basis, or you're cultivating new ones by planting the seeds and fertilizing new ground by, implementing new habits like sleeping better, eating healthier and moving more, etc., etc. So that's why whatever you mix is actually, not potentially benefiting you. And some combinations can be, again, toxic for you and can lead to development of serotonin syndrome. You can potentially go in seizures. Of course, better not, but nevertheless, that can happen. So anyway, and of course, some combinations can be just really difficult for your experience in general. So best it is to avoid combinations and just, experience the medicine in its purity, because it can be life-changing. But then again, when you are mixing other substances, you're diluting the experience and you're sending yourself on a trajectory that is completely unknown. So better not do that for your own safety. Let's go to the next one. Find a sitter. This is a really important one, especially when it comes to people who are consuming entheogens for the first time. Not only the first time, but when it comes to consumption of a high dose of an entheogen, you want to make sure that there's a person who is in charge of the safety of the space. So you probably heard of the stories that, someone, somewhere consumed an entheogen and then jumped out of the window. Usually those stories are based on rumors and fears. They have zero substance. If you start to dig and actually find out that it was not the case in most of the cases. I'm not sure if there was ever, well, probably there were cases, yes, there were. But nevertheless, the idea here is that when a person goes through an entheogenic experience, they tend to, first of all, their perception of reality is distorted, and then they can potentially come to a conclusion that gravity doesn't exist. Because it's a construct in a sense, like, oh, it's a physicist invented it, I can fly, okay? So a sitter is a person that would come to you and say, you know what, let's just sit over there and think about it, contemplate on this, maybe take a few deep breaths and, why do you want to test it right now? Just like divert the attention from testing it. Or that's what happened in some of the clinical trials. For instance, like there was one person that I've heard of, is that she was, going through the psychedelic assisted therapy with an eye mask, with the music, with the therapist, and then there was a painting on the wall. And then she had a feeling that she can go through the wall into the painting. So she rushed to the wall and hit her head on the wall, of course. But yeah, apparently the therapist was not prepared to, tackle that on time. So the sitter is a sober person that is in charge of the safety of a person who is going under the influence of an entheogen. And this is critical sober. However, when it comes to ceremonial context, it is more or less tolerable to, I think it's more or less like a practice in the sense that facilitator is taking like a mild dose so that they're kind of attuned, but it's not mind altering. It's like museum dose or lower so that they are in the same like wavelength, so to speak, frequency, but they are not like mind altered completely. But in the therapeutic context, of course, when it is work with a therapist, they do not consume entheogens because it's a totally different model, and it's important that the person is sober because that person can make adequate decisions, okay, and help. But the goal of a sitter, and this is really, really important to highlight, is to not intervene in one's journey. So if somebody is crying, laughing, they are going through something really challenging and difficult, sitter should not intervene at all costs, unless person specifically asks for help. In that case, of course, yeah, let's sit and breathe, talk to me, what are you going through right now? But never like guide anyone into feeling something or not even indoctrinating. This is really, really critical because again, People under the influence of entheogens, they're in a very vulnerable state. So if you find a sitter who has very strong opinion about some political issue, and then, accidentally you touch that topic, and then that person starts to, share their worldview with you, basically, because you are in a very vulnerable state and you are in this critical period, they can actually rewire your belief system. Moreover, if you have any religious items in the place where you are journeying, those religious items can actually create belief system in you, believe it or not. Like, you probably heard of Charles Manson, right? A serial killer in the United States. Charles Manson used LSD to basically brainwash his followers. So it is highly important to make sure that a trip sitter is a person who can be there, present, think about your safety, make sure that you're not going to do any stupid shit, but then just hold the space, support, and not intervene. Never. This is the sole idea. They are there to just make sure that you don't do anything that could hurt yourself. That's it. And then you thank them, and then they go, basically. But you need to be very explicit about it. Same goes for the therapeutic touch that I touched before. Okay, so yeah, and that person has to be non-judgmental, of course, right? So that they don't like judge you for whatever you're doing with your psyche. You're tripping. Like, dude, come on. I asked you just to hold the space, okay? Same goes for facilitators and shamans. Sometimes people, they have their own belief systems, and then they impose these belief systems on others. That's a separate topic. Anyway, let's move to another one that's called "It's Temporary." This is a critical one. So I'll have a gift for you, and I'll share it with you later. But there's an item that I use, and it helps me to navigate difficult journeys, or just journeys in itself. This is a compass that I have. It's more of a, of course, you can't use it for navigation anywhere, because it's not showing you true north, but it gives you a sense of grounding that you will come back. And this is really, really important when it comes to entheogenic journeys. Sometimes people spiral into madness. I've been there many times when you feel like you're gone mad and you're not coming back. That's it. You're done. You're baked. Bye-bye. They're going to admit you to a mental institution, and that's it. The trick here is to remind yourself that you will come back. And if you remember, if you've seen that movie called Inception, you remember that thing that they use to remind themselves that they're not in a dream. This is somewhat similar. You need to remind yourself that you will come back, because an entheogenic journey is, they call it a journey, not for nothing, okay? So back in the day, in ancient Greece, they say there's partial scientific evidence demonstrating that people like Plato, Marcus Aurelius, and others, they've been going through so-called Eleusinian mysteries. Eleusinian mysteries were the rituals that were held once in 4 years, and they had the part of the ritual was the consumption of a mind-altering substance that had traces of LSD. So basically, people went through the dying process, so to speak, and the entheogens can actually make people feel like they are dying, like literally. And when a person going through that, especially when they've never experienced anything like that before, it can be really scary, because people lose sense of self, the ego dissolutes, and then they're like, oh shit, I'm dying, or I'm going mad, I'm not gonna come back. They go in a paranoid state. But then, when the substance leaves the body, people come back. People don't go crazy because they have consumed an entheogen. It does not work like this. But, as said, if a person has predisposition and the environment is not safe, yes, there is a chance 5% of people can actually get PTSD as a result of a consumption of an entheogen in an unsafe, uncontrolled environment. So you need to remember that it's all about preparation, it's all about making sure that you're safe, but reminding yourself that the substance will wear off and you will come back. It's just inevitable. It's important to remember that it's a two-way ticket, right? It's not one way. You're not going there and that's it. You will come back. However crazy that may feel, however, spiral, however mad you may feel yourself, you will come back. And that's why it's important to remind yourself that it's temporary. So even if a person is coming to you and says, I'm going mad, and say, you ask like 3 questions. What's your name? Where are you from? And then you say, it will wear off. You will come back. That's it. It's important to remind yourself and others that it is temporary. And if you feel like there is something that you can help yourself with, you can either take some really grounding element with you or write on a paper, it is temporary. You will come back with your own handwriting. And put it next to yourself so that it serves as a reminder, because yes, it can be destabilizing. Yes, you can lose yourself in the deeper layers of your psyche, but yes, time passes by and you will come back, although time does not feel linear and you may feel like you're stuck there forever, but no, it's temporary. The next one, 9th, and we're getting to closure slowly, is called trust, be open, let go. This is a really beautiful concept that is cultivated by people who are conducting trials with the assistance of entheogens. But the idea there is that you basically surrender to whatever is happening. And this is really critical because one of the factors that contributes to people going through challenging experiences, aka bad trips, is the fact that when they deal with something difficult, pain, suffering, trauma, whatever, they don't want to deal with it. They're like, no, I don't want to see that shit. I don't want to deal with that shit. And that on itself creates tension within the nervous system that puts you in a heightened arousal state, in a sympathetic state, apologies. And then your body is like flooded with cortisol, and then that's it. It just magnifies, and you're spiraling into this like intensity. But then there's a beautiful phrase that I don't remember who said it, but nevertheless, if in your journey you meet a monster, let it eat you. You don't fight it. You just surrender. The word surrender as a concept is quite straightforward, but it's hard to really feel it. So if you are going through a really challenging experience, you can actually do it physically, as in like bowing down to the divine, like just going this, I surrender, whatever it is, it is. It's not like you're praying, save me from this. No. You're letting it go. Imagining like a 20-foot wave heading at you. What are you going to do? You cannot fight it. You just let go and you don't do anything. You don't fight it. But if you go through a really difficult experience and you meet your monster, you meet your fears, you meet whatever you meet it with curiosity. Ask it, what are you trying to show me? And there's another beautiful phrase that a friend of mine used: show me, teach me, guide me. You don't take out guns, you're like, no. You know what? Take me wherever you want to take me. Show me whatever I need to see. I am here. I'm all ears. I'm here to learn about myself. This is the attitude that you go into this journey, and this is the attitude that you keep with you during that journey. This is a reminder that you don't need to fight. It's just completely pointless. The more you fight, the worse it is. Especially it comes to experiences with medicine like ayahuasca. You sit there, you take, a second cup, and then you're like, oh shit, I'm gonna purge. Purge. Don't hold it. The thing about purging, it's cleansing. It's the way your nervous system just gets rid of all the shit that you've been bearing throughout your own life. And just let it go. Don't hold it. Don't try to, I need to. No. The more you resist, the worse you make it for yourself. The word of surrender is very deep, but once you understand it, you're like, whatever, just bring it on, that's it. And all the pain that comes at you, it may sound really radical and paradoxical, but pain is the medicine. You just embrace it, you witness it. You don't fight it, you observe it, you witness it, you let it unfold, you be there, you sit with it, sit with the discomfort, don't try to change shit. When it wears off, you think, you sit, you like, okay, what was it? You make your own choices, and then you do whatever you want to do. Integrate properly, we'll talk about it in a moment, but then in the moment, you just let go whatever happens, okay? So this is the beauty of it, especially when it comes to going through the healing journey, when it comes to traumatic events of the past that are actually leading to severe cases of depression, PTSD, or whatever. You re-experience the traumatic event. That on itself becomes part of the healing process. By re-experiencing in a system that is flooded with serotonin or dopamine, depending on the specific molecule that you're using, but that experience on itself helps you rewire the neural networks and let go of the pain that you've been carrying throughout your own life. So that's why it's important to trust the process wherever it takes and just be open about whatever you meet. Finally, aim for integration. So one of the key landmark studies that actually sparked the so-called psychedelic renaissance recently is the work by Roland Griffiths, who died a couple of years ago. His study was around effects of psilocybin for people who went through, basically anxiety, cancer patients. Okay, so they've been dealing with death anxiety. And then when they gave them the medicine, they evaluated the efficacy. And then, of course, some people said that that journey with psilocybin was either one of the top five experiences throughout their entire life, or the most important one. Okay. So what does that mean? The most important experience of your life in the category of top five. The type of experiences that people would refer as one of the most important and meaningful in life is birth of a child, death of a parent, or something similar. Okay, so people go through that type of experience with an entheogen in a ceremonial context somewhere in Amazon or even here in Barcelona, wherever. And then on Monday, they get back to work. Okay, so on Saturday, they died. They went through rebirth. They faced their demons, trauma, whatever. And then on Monday, no, nothing. Yeah, just pretend they're a regular human being, right? That can be really destabilizing because there's no support network, because there's a lot of stigma, because usually there aren't many people that you can even talk about it in the open, just discuss it, but talking through it. So that on itself can be even a bigger problem, because the consequences that people face when they consume entheogens and they're like, oh, I have this issue. But yes, of course. I mean, you get to deal with a traumatic event from the past. I mean, that is difficult. How do you process that? How do you integrate that? How do you live with that after? I mean, you just not Monday. I mean, you got Tuesday, Wednesday, and your entire life ahead of you. So if something like this happens over the weekend, what to do? Integrate. Integration is a concept that been introduced by a Zen Buddhist in the United States, if I remember, in the 70s or 80s. Actually, no, it was a concept of spiritual bypassing, but which is connected to integration. But my bad. Anyway, the concept of integration is still relatively new, even in the global entheogenic community. And when we talk about integration, people can tell you all sorts of practices. And there's an organization called ICEERS. It is Barcelona-based. It is one of the most reputable organizations, NGOs in the global entheogenic community, and they have a program on integration of psychedelic experience. I'm actually going through it right now, and that is a very nicely structured approach on how to integrate a psychedelic experience. ICEERS, and I'll share with you all the information about this organization in particular. It will be in the handout in the QR code, so you don't need to write that one down. One of the co-founders, or parts of the team is Mark Aishala, and he wrote a book called The Integration of Psychedelic Experience, which is a brilliant book, and he structured the knowledge around the 7 dimensions of integration. So it's not just mental, there are other behavioral and spiritual, etc., etc. But the idea here is that once you go through the journey itself, and we go quickly back to the therapeutic protocol, is that it requires not just preparation and the journey, but integration, right? So this is the work that happens after the journey. This is where actually you work on, well, potentially rewiring your neural networks, habits, or whatever you're doing in terms of integrating the experience in itself. And there are events that are happening in Barcelona in particularly, if I remember correctly, like each third Wednesday of the month, there's a sharing circle that is happening where you can go free of charge. ICers provide up to 5 free of charge consultations for people who are dealing with the difficult, challenging experiences. And in Spanish and probably in Catalan as well, in English. So you can call them and actually get help in case you are dealing with really difficult issues. But generally speaking, whenever it comes to integration, it is important to understand. So, okay, you got this insight. Are you going to do anything about it? If not, well, there's one beautiful phrase in the community that says, if you have not integrated whatever entheogens gave you, they're going to take it back. Okay? So you feel like, oh, now I know. Yeah, but if you don't do anything about it, it means nothing actually, because the integration happens on Monday and on Tuesday. And again, it can last for weeks, months, or even years. And I mentioned in the beginning, I had no support back in the day. I had one really destabilizing experience with entheogens, and it took me 9 years to figure out like what was it. I couldn't understand like what the really what was it. And then when I figured out, like, oh, okay. And then that was integration for me, because I was able to actually implement changes in life based on that insight from 9 years ago. That took me really a lot of time to digest. But of course, nowadays there are a lot of tools that can help you integrate. There are integration specialists, and there are other people who can actually work and help you with that. So we're good in timing. So a few other things that I wanted to mention. First and foremost, and it came last, but I wanted to test how it lands. The reason that I'm here and the reason I'm talking to you about entheogens is that it's just coming from my personal experience, but I am actually a certified psychedelic coach. Okay, I went through a 10-month program in the Psychedelic Coaching Institute in the United States, which basically gave structure and framework, but I knew most of it nevertheless. So the idea here is that I have a lot of information that is science-based, and whatever I said is not just my experience. That information is coming from a really big amount of scientific publications that I've gathered in my blog called Entheogenic Renaissance, that I've been running for 2.5 years now. And you can find it on Telegram with the function of automatic translation. You can find basically like an overview of articles of scientific publications, like a short formats, and then you can go into details and see it for yourself. To this day, there are roughly 800 scientific papers in my channel analyzed with the assistance of AI or myself, so that you can see for yourself how it works and how it's applied. And of course, I went through other programs by University of California, Berkeley on psychedelics and the mind. That is completely open program to anyone. It's made by them. It's put out there in the open, and anyone can go through it. And there's another protocol that I went through by a company called Cybin that produces novel types of molecules called Embark. It's a framework designed for people who are conducting psychedelic-assisted therapy. So the 10 safety measures are designed to help you and others to basically safely experience entheogens in a way that not only would make sure that you not mess up your psyche, but also, if you read between the lines, this is the way of a very structured and potentially therapeutic approach to actually self-heal. But To build on top of that, I have developed a protocol that is actually outlined in like 7 pages with prompts and structure that can help people to go through a self-healing journey with the assistance of entheogens. But of course, you want to make sure that you're not doing this by yourself. You can find a sitter, a person, a friend, a relative, I don't know, someone who can just sit and hold space for you. But the thing about therapeutic approach in general is that our psyche has the capacity to self-heal, which is crazy, so to speak, right? And Stanislav Grof, one of the founders of psychedelic assisted therapy, he described the concept of the inner healer that is now used in the basically the protocols adopted by MAPS, which is probably one of the most reputable organizations worldwide, called Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies of the United States. And in their protocol, they refer to the works of Stanislav Grof and the self-healing properties of our psyche, of the inner healer. And the idea of a psychedelic-assisted therapy is basically help people, well, first of all, build a therapeutic alliance with a person who is actually, holding the container and doing the therapeutic work, but also, going into the details and helping the person to understand the problem, not the problem, but the root cause of their issues that they're going through. Then, of course, holding the space and making sure that the person is, going through whatever they need to go through, I don't know, crying, shouting, expressing the emotions that are sitting in the body, could be somatic release, whatever. And then helping a person to integrate all the findings from that journey into their life. And this is the idea that basically a person is doing the work. Therapist of any modality is actually helping as just a guide. By steering people towards self-inquiry or creating a space environment in which a person actually is dealing with whatever is sitting inside, traumatic events from the past or whatever that was, and then a person is then integrating that back, putting it together in a new form of their identity, the one that no longer pushes away the painful events, but rather embraces them in a sense and treats them as part of their narrative, but the person is rewriting the narrative. A therapist or a shaman or a coach or facilitator is basically a person who is creating this therapeutic container for the person to help them navigate. And there's one other thing that I just remembered that I forgot to mention. It is referred to point number 8, which is temporary. Sometimes we can get flooded with emotions, with difficult feelings, something that is stuck in the body, and we can get really agitated, okay? Our nervous system can be regulated with breath. And there are 3 types of breath that are extremely efficient when it comes to self-regulation or help to regulate others. One is called the square breathing, and this information will be in the handout. You don't need to write down. The square breathing is done in the following manner. So you inhale within 4 seconds. You then hold for 4 seconds. Then you exhale for the duration of 4 seconds. And then you hold for 4 seconds. And then you repeat it as many times as you want, but just doing it like 3 or 4 times would be enough. There's another one, which is called 4-7-8. It's pretty much similar. You inhale within 4 seconds, you hold for 7 seconds, and then you slowly, gradually exhale for the duration of 8 long seconds. Now, these are both efficient, but there is one problem with this. They require time tracking. As said, in an entheogenic experience, time does not exist. So it may be quite challenging. I mean, if you have a sitter will guide you, okay? Just follow me, do what I say, etc. But when it comes to your own experiences, actually you don't want to interact with any digital devices. And I forgot, of course, to mention, but it's kind of obvious, but still, whenever you're journeying, make sure that you put all your devices in airplane mode. Don't use any social media. Don't try to write messages to anyone, voice messages, just don't do it. It's not a good idea. It can lead to, you then explaining, I don't know how to put it. Yeah, well, you see, yeah, I was high. Anyway, so, but then if you want to have a really efficient, effective tool, there is a third one, which I like the most because it does not require any time tracking. It is extremely effective in your daily life, whenever you feel like stressed, whenever you feel aroused and you want to relax your nervous system. This is what's called a physiological sigh. We actually already did it. If you not notice it, but I'll walk you through it right now because it's really easy to replicate. You basically inhale until your lungs are full. And when your lungs are full, you make a second inhale. And then you slowly, gradually let go by extending the exhale longer and longer and longer and longer and longer until your lungs are full. Oh, sorry, empty. And then you make another one. And then a second one on top. And then exhale longer and longer and longer. And the beauty about that one is that 3 repetitions is sufficient enough to just calm your nervous system pretty much instantly. But when you are in the entheogenic journey, it becomes some sort of a game. Like how long you can extend the exhale. And the longer you extend the exhale, the more calm you become. And this is the beauty of it, because you don't need to keep track of time. The idea is that you inhale, take a second inhale, and then you just like exhale, you just play with it by extending it further and further and further and further. And you can find yourself just doing this for like easily 5 to 10 minutes or even longer if you feel like, and it's totally fine, because this is how you relax your nervous system. This is how you balance yourself. This is how you come to senses. This is how you just, chill. And there's one other thing that I forgot to mention. It's a way of self-regulation during the journey, during the entheogenic experience, is basically, it's, I don't know, I think it's not yet properly studied in terms of comparison, but nevertheless, generally speaking, psychedelic-assisted therapy is done in a very straightforward manner. You got comfortable surrounding, you got like a couch, you got a person who is lying down with a mask, with earphones. Oh yeah, and there's a lot of playlists specifically designed for different types of medicine. I've compiled like at least 9 of them for different purposes and different medicines, but they go in an arc so that basically music not becomes the medicine, but it guides the journey itself. Right. So a person is lying down with a mask, with earphones, with a blanket on top, really comfortable and cozy, and just going through whatever they're going through, letting go, be open, etc., etc. And then you see in the ceremonial context, generally people who hold the ceremonies, of course, they're sitting, right? And then people usually lie down and they're like, oh, you got a mat, you got a pillow, etc., etc. But there's one other thing that is worth recognizing. This is pure biology, and depending on our state of the body in which we're like horizontal or vertical, we have different waves, like wavelengths of our brain that are produced. Like we're more alert or more like chilled and relaxed, right? So when you lie down, you become in a more relaxed state, which is quite obvious for all of us, right? When you sit, you're like more alert. So this is actually a really important mechanism when it comes to an entheogenic journey. So if you want to dial down on the intensity, lie down, just in a horizontal position. If you want to be like really, really more intense, you sit up, put something behind your back so that you are in a more vertical position, and then, well, buckle up, because in a vertical position is going to be really different types of experience, I'm telling you. I mean, coming not only from my own experience, but from people who experience it for themselves, it's very different, okay? Don't try to walk as well. I mean, not a good idea. But just generally sitting upward, and not necessarily with your back straight, But in this state, the intensity goes up. Okay, so again, if you want to dial it down, lie down, breathe, exhale, observe, and yeah, notice. There are a few other things that you can do, which is somewhat, for some people, I don't know why, controversial, but to me it makes perfect sense, is journaling during the entheogenic journey. Journaling, yeah, to do it, yes. You can journal in many ways. Well, it took me some time to learn how to write while I was under the influence, because there've been cases when I was like, oh shit, that's a really brilliant idea, I'm writing it down. And then in the morning I look at it like, yeah, I can't even understand what the fuck it says, you know? It's not even words, it's just like some scribbles. But then it took me some time and I'm like, okay, now I can write. So when it comes to writing, you can draw, which is also good, you can write. But if you are writing, one thing to remember and hold in your head is that you are writing for your future sober self. Okay? Let me elaborate on that. Sometimes people have these epiphanies. They're like, oh, you know, now I get it. This is it. They write like this. This is it. This is the most important thing. And then next day you're like, what the fuck is this shit? Like, you can't, I mean, what do you do with it? Nothing. It's pointless. It's just like, okay, well, good, nice, whatever. And yeah.
What about recording yourself?
Yes, that I was about to get to that. So there's another way, of course, that you can just click record an audio and just do that. But then, yeah, you use AI tools to basically do the transcript, which is quite easy. Or you can use, you know, I think on Apple devices, pretty much automatic now when you record a voice and then transcribe automatically, so that you can record the entire journey and you don't need to be afraid that you missed out on something. You just talk whatever comes. And this is the beauty. You don't, I mean, whatever comes, you just voice it out. But then if you're trying to deliver a message to yourself, make sure that you will be able to decipher it. Like, seriously, I mean, I've been to so many cases where like, what does it mean? I don't know. I mean, I lost the meaning completely. So that you need to hold this in your head that, yeah, in a couple of days you're going to sober up and, you know, what would it mean? So sometimes now in my journeys, when I write it, I'm like, no, I'm not gonna understand that. So I'm writing like additional comments to it, like this is connected to this. And sometimes it can be repetitive, but the idea here is that you are basically in that metaphor that I used earlier about the Marian Trench, okay? So you're going deep down in this trench, and you can actually interact with aspects of your psyche that are like identity level. You can like literally understand, oh, these are the pillars of my identity. Like, wow, I didn't even think about it, you know? Or these are the traumatic events, or these are the realizations, these are the insights. And like, okay, how do I, you know, take it back with me? Because the thing about entheogenic experience is that during the journey, you feel like, oh, you know, you figured it out, you know it all. But then when you go back, you're like, oh man, usually there's one thing that stays with you and it's good on itself. But yeah, it's just, I prefer to take as much as I can. That's why I journal during. And then usually I take the time to like sit and go through the notes so that I can then make additional comments and think of whether or not I can start implementing these changes or introduce like these new habits or whatever in my daily life based on the observations that I made while I was in a state of altered consciousness. So that's journal, and I think that's pretty much it. So just to give you a bit of a follow-up, I will share with you this. You can scan it. So that first QR code has an extended version of what I've just shared with you. I created a doc called 10 Tips on How to Avoid Bad Trip, or safety instructions for people who don't want to mess up their own psyche. This is a free of charge document. You can like share it with anyone, anywhere, because it's good knowledge. It can help people stay safe, right? It doesn't require any investments or anything. It has really detailed information. There's a nice graph. It's also in that file, that graph representing the harms from different types of substances. Yeah, it's by David Nutt. It's a very famous study from 2010, published originally in Lancet and then published in other magazines as well. It outlines the harms of different substances in comparison with each other. And you'll see that, in fact, entheogens are quite safe, but if you follow the, safety instructions, right? Because they can be potentially dangerous in arms of wrong people, like Charles Manson and others. And there are other things that are worth reminding ourselves is that entheogens can actually act as ego inflators. Okay, so there's this concept of ego inflation, and there are people still, even in a global entheogenic community, that have this, weird idea that we should give entheogens to everyone. No. First of all, they're not for everybody. Second of all, they don't heal people by themselves. So if a person is, narcissistic, they have a narcissistic personality disorder, it's probably going to get worse. But there are scientific studies that can actually address narcissistic personality disorder with the assistance of MDMA. But it requires for a person to want to be healed, okay? But if a person, with a massive ego, just some random ceremony or some random context, get experience with entheogens, they would think that they are even bigger and most important person in the world.
It actually happens often.
Absolutely, yes. And this is the dark side. This is the dark side that people don't talk about, but they still think that, we should give it to everybody. No, never. And there's one other thing that I want to mention, is that usually it's a phase that most people who consume entheogens go through whenever they interact with the medicine for the first time or second time. Like, I should be the shaman. I should give it to all. I should foster healing. We've been there. It's a phase. Some people don't go through that, unfortunately. So when it comes to entrusting the keys to your psyche to a healer, a shaman, a coach, a therapist, whomever that is, make sure that the person actually did work with a supervisor, a therapist, someone who helped them treat their own issues, their own trauma, before exposing yourself to a human being that can be highly dysfunctional. This is such a big problem. The entire entheogenic community to this day is completely unregulated. It's in the gray. People do whatever the hell they do. There's no screening. I've been to ceremonies with some shamans that came from, Shipibo, whatever, and then they're like, there's a place, 25 people, it's an ayahuasca, and I'm prepared, I know what I'm going through, but it was my first ayahuasca experience, nevertheless. And then they're like, okay, is anybody on antidepressants? Does anyone have depression? Okay, that's it. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Sign here.
No signing, no nothing.
They made me sign, but I was like, okay, previously before I got them, hey, just these conditions, this is not for you, and not sign this paper that we told you.
Yeah.
And we release self-responsibility. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, people cover their asses, which makes sense, right? Because if something happens, they're like, you got a paper sign. But this is part of the informed consent. This is, why it's important. This is why I'm doing this. It's not just, for somebody out there, because your psyche is in your hands, and the safety of your psyche is in your hands. So whenever you go to work with someone, make sure that they have a proper training. Make sure that they did the work. Make sure that they've integrated their own shadow. Make sure that they are equipped and they know how to deal. Ask them questions. Oh, yes, of course. Yes. You ask them, what are your precautionary measures if, I spiral into paranoid state? What if somebody, does, starts to scream and run around and try to, be violent with others? What are your actions? If they don't answer, well, it's a red flag. Seriously. And I've heard some people, they're like, I'll just tie them down to a tree. Like, what?
You just what?
Tie them down to a tree.
Sure.
It was not a joke.
No.
It is this is on itself trauma, not just for the person that's being tied up, but for the entire people in that container. Because somebody can get tied up during that. It's just completely crazy. Yeah, no, it's just ridiculous. So again, these safety measures are here for you to implement by yourself, for yourself, so that you stay safe. Because yeah, people are not gonna take care of you unless you pay a lot of money and it's really trained professional, and then they, yes, of course, they can walk you through by your hand. But in all other cases, yeah, it's your psyche. So that concludes my speech. And now, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. We got time, so there's no rush unless you need to go somewhere. Thank you very much. Oh, before I forget, I do have gifts for you, and yes. So I mentioned that compass before, and this is the thing that actually helped me. So just a quick story behind it. While I was going through the psychedelic coaching certification program, there was an offline part in Costa Rica where we gathered the people from the cohort. There was like 45 people or so, mainly from the United States, and then me from ex-Soviet bloc. And then the invitation was to bring something that you can share with others. And the one like course mate of ours, she's from the United States. She brought a compass to each and every one of us. And at first I was like, wow, that's really cool. It's really nice. And then I started to use that one in my journeys. So whenever I go into the journey, I take it with me. For me, it's a reminder that I'll get back, I'll be fine. And when I land back, it's a reminder to reorient on the surface, on this planet, like this body, like where, I'm landed here, like, oh, okay. So where am I? Ah, yeah, okay. But then, of course, it's more of a symbolic thing, but it's a really good grounding tool that you can take with you and just, remind yourself that you will be safe and you will come back. And just, find your true north. So.